So why isn't Russia a part of NATO? Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense Logical Reason. As always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So as we know, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is still ongoing. Now, it's not as active as it once was, in the beginning. And of course, both sides are probably running out of resources, weapons. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the West giving weapon systems to the Ukraine, this would have been over like a long time ago. But it's kind of died down now. I know that the media hasn't spoken on it any, but the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine was because the NATO was actually approaching Ukraine to try to be a part of NATO. And this is a violation of an agreement that they had with the Soviet Union, that basically all of the Russian bloc nations would not be, NATO could not approach them, those old Soviet bloc nations, that NATO couldn't approach them to be part of NATO. And of course, they've long since violated that, but they were basically approaching Ukraine to try to bring Ukraine into NATO, and Ukraine is right there at Russia's doorstep. And at this point, Russia's, who's ignored it, at this point they say they could no longer ignore this anymore. So they invaded to Ukraine. And this will be no different than the response that we had during the missile Cuba crisis. When the Soviet Union was putting missiles in Cuba, we responded. It's the same thing. If Russia or China was basically had an agreement with Mexico to put missiles in Mexico, America will respond. So we can't really get mad at Russia for the response that they had, because of NATO violating the agreement that they had with Russia. But the question then has to be asked, well then why isn't Russia a part of NATO? Why isn't Russia? It's a major country, just like all the other major countries. I mean, there are countries out there that's nowhere near on the scale of Russia that's part of NATO, so why not Russia? Well, it's because I'm going to tell y'all what I believe, but there's a lot of evidence and data to support this. But I believe it's basically the military-industrial complex, right? They're showing their evil hand again. The same military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about in his closing address. And basically, the military-industrial complex are the people who make the weapons, the weapon systems, and the vehicles for the federal military. The people who make the planes, the tanks, the helicopters, the transport vehicles. They make the bombs, the missiles, the shells for the tanks, and so on and so forth. Well, these people have invested interest in hyping war, because the more wars we're in, the more weapons we use, the more we have to buy, the more money they make. This is why Eisenhower warned us about them and how the military-industrial complex will be a danger, because they spend billions in campaign contribution, and the politicians are almost beholden to them. And we have evidence of what happens when there is no boogeyman, right? Okay, and because Russia and China can't be in NATO, because there has to be a boogeyman to create that fear. And like I said, we saw what happened when the boogeyman went away, when the Soviet Union collapsed. The government, or Lockheed Martin, was in the process of developing the F-22 Raptor. Now they basically told Lockheed Martin, the government, they wanted the best plane, air-to-air fighter, dominance fighter, spare no expense, and that's what Lockheed delivered. Well, the federal government the Air Force was initially supposed to buy 1,000 of these, because they were not available for export. Only America has these. And once the Soviet Union collapsed, then it completely changed their strategy. So now the military, the Air Force had no need for 1,000 Raptors. So they at one time they cut it to 750, and then it was cut down to 600. It went to 500. Then that was reduced to 350. which eventually it was reduced to 187 airframes. That's money that Lockheed Martin didn't get because they didn't sell more of the fighters. So they need that boogeyman. This is why I believe Russia and China is not in the NATO, because they need a boogeyman. Right now, they need some type of excuse to perpetuate the military spending. And as so many people have said, we spend more on military budget than the next 10 nations combined. Well, who makes money off of that? Obviously, the military industrial complex gets their cut somewhere in there, and they have invested interest in keeping Russia and China out of it because they need that boogeyman. That's why I'm so glad that we have a person like Trump in office, because Donald Trump is not beholden to these people. And I believe firstly that we're going to have, say, Donald Trump-esque politicians for the next few years who are not going to be beholden to these people, and we can start making significant changes and having politicians advocate for the betterment of America, because it's not for the benefit of America to spend so much money on the military budget. That doesn't benefit Americans. I mean, we do have national defense, but we don't have to spend that kind of money and have the fraud and waste that we've been spending. That doesn't benefit America. It only benefits mostly the military industrial complex, and this is why they advocate for this. Anyway, so I don't see why Russia and China shouldn't just be part of a NATO, and a lot of the issues we have today wouldn't exist, but the military industrial complex wouldn't make their money. Again, that's just my 2 cents on it, but if you do your research and you look at the data, you will see that what I'm saying is reasonable reasoning for me to believe what I said is true. Anyway, y'all, as always, until next time.